Hey guys, before we get cozy tonight, make sure you like this video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy this kind of history journey. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I always find it fascinating too. See friendly faces from around the world, even if it's just names on a screen. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a gentle fan for a soft background hum, and settle back as we ease into tonight's story together. Picture this. It's the year 1348, and you are a humble peasant living in a tiny village. The morning air feels crisp but oddly heavy, as if the sky carries a secret it's too afraid to whisper. You step out of your creaky wooden hut, a lean-to of wattle and daub, that feels slightly warmer inside than the chill outside. Your house has walls smoothed over with mud, mixed with straw and bits of animal dung, the best and stickiest insulation you can manage on a budget. The roof of straw holds strong after recent rain, though you keep a pile of dried turf and clay handy for patching should a leak start. Outside, the ground is damp with the spring thaw, and your front yard is just a muddy patch. It isn't much to look at, but enough to keep out the worst of the rain. In modern terms, it's like having a little stucco shed with nature's own fiberglass insulation. Crude, but it works. Inside, the smell of last night's cooking fire still lingers on the air, a smoky aroma of charred oak wood and roasted onions. There's no chimney flue here. Smoke curls lazily up through a hole in the roof. You gather around the tiny hearth with your family, your spouse and your 2 children, who huddle together for warmth. The firelight dances across the walls in a quiet rhythm. A pot is simmering on the hearth, water and whatever scraps of grain or turnip you managed to save from yesterday's meager harvest. It's not a grand feast by any measure, but it's what you'll have for breakfast, a simple pottage flavored with salt and some dried herbs. As the stew bubbles, your stomach rumbles. The pot is thin, so one side is definitely hotter. You keep rotating it so it doesn't burn. In fact, stirring this thin gruel is the medieval equivalent of hitting scroll to refresh on your stubborn newsfeed. You just hope it doesn't decide to heat up too quickly. Your clothes are coarse spun wool, a rough shirt, and a patchy cloak that smells slightly of goat and hay. The wool scratches your skin, but it's warm and precious. You dress in layers, a long shirt, a shorter tunic over it, and that cloak over your shoulders to fend off the chill. Even your boots are nothing fancy, just simple leather stitched together. Every day they get you from point A to point B and back without falling apart. In your bag, you tuck a small loaf of dark bread and a wedge of hard cheese, your lunch for the day, if you need it. It's a humble meal compared to a modern packed lunch, but in the 1300s, a handful of brown bread with a bit of cheese and maybe a hunk of smoked fish is not bad at all. If only your 21st century self could do a mental flip and realize that's your medieval PB&J, minus the jelly. You step outside. The village is waking up slowly, if waking up is what this is called these days. It's more like a groan than a full yawn. A few chickens cluck and wander through the muddy yard, pecking for stray grain. The goats stretch and bleat softly, chewing. The cud, somewhere, a dog lets out a hopeful bark, anticipating scraps. The roosters are still snoozing, and there's no clatter of carts yet. Birds chirp lazily in the branches of the old oak tree that stands watch nearby, leaving you a moment to breathe in the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. It feels peaceful, but you know peace is a mood that can change without warning in this world. Before long, you're off to your chores. Today, like every day, you have a list of tasks that never seems to end. First on the list is water. You head toward the communal well at the center of the village. It's still early, and a few others are already gathered there. You nod to old Edgar, who is heaving up the bucket. He gives a tired wave. "Morning to you," you murmur, though your throat is still raspy from last night's cold. Edgar looks thin. He's missed quite a bit of work lately. You know in your bones why, though he hasn't said it. Perhaps he caught the fever, or Maybe it's just the worry catching up with him. At the well, you lower your own bucket and pull up cold, clear water. You almost shudder at the chill on your hand, a quick reminder that the chill of early spring is still here. You sip carefully. It tastes faintly earthy, which isn't terrible. This well has a note of iron in it. With a couple of buckets filled, you balance them under each arm. It's heavy, but manageable. You crane your neck. Above, the sky is lightening to a soft pink. Not far to go before you can pour this into your 2 big jugs for home and maybe greet the dawn. On the way back, you pause by your little herb patch. It's more of a spice corner really. A few plants you manage to grow. Some thyme, mugwort, rosemary, and a clump of dried sage hanging over a doorway. You recall something your grandmother said 100 times. Hanging herbs keeps out evil spirits and bad smells. So, you pluck a sprig of sage and tuck it in the eaves by the door, hoping its strong smell might keep out the worst of the winter damp or any invisible noxious stuff. In modern terms, it's like hanging air fresheners before they invented science-based air filters. You also rub a few leaves between your fingers, breathing in their pungent smell. It's earthy and sharp. You chuckle to yourself and think, if only this could air filter the actual Black Death away, we'd be rich. Of course, there's no science to sage and plumes of smoke beyond comforting tradition, but in these days every small comfort counts. The morning continues. You help your spouse, let's call her Ellen, gather firewood. Together, you load split oak logs into the basket. The air turns warmer as the sun climbs a bit. Once enough wood is chopped for several hours of fire, Ellen turns to you. Did you hear the latest news? She asks quietly, once your children have gone off playing in the yard with a scrap of cloth. Some traders from town said theirs. A sickness traveling by ship down south. Strange fevers and black spots, they say. You pause, axe in hand. Traders often exaggerate to make stories dramatic. But then again, that's exactly what worried you. You recall the docks far from here, in Tales, where blackened ships came and left people dead in the street. You swallow hard. How far? Is it now? You ask, voice even. Ellen sighs. Who can tell? They said, starting from the east, moving through ports. If it's real, it could be months before it reaches any of us. She smiles softly, trying to reassure you. For now, let's just mind our crops and keep our noses clean. You nod, trying to push the worrying thought aside. After all, what can you do but wait? You smack the axe lightly on a piece of firewood, breaking it neatly in 2. You both know that paying too much heed to a rumor could fray the mind. Still, in the back of your mind, the picture of those sailors covered in boils lingers. Soon. It's mid-morning, and you head to the fields. The village pasture and crops area is only a little way out. Today's task is to sow some barley in the largest field. Kneeling in the dirt, you scoop handfuls of seed and scatter them into the prepared furrows. The soil is still thawing out from winter, warm and smelling faintly of life. It feels good between your fingers, soft earth and little rocks. The action is rhythmic. Scatter seed, press into ground, cover. It's simple and repetitive work, the kind that keeps your mind busy on everything except your worries. Each handful you throw is a tiny promise of next year's bread. Your thoughts still circle back to the news you heard. You've tried a folk remedy you've heard about, saying a small blessing as you drop each seed, like pouring out a prayer. After all, your children chase each seed with hopeful grins. Maybe that counts as an audience for luck. Bless these seeds, you whisper quietly, and keep all your poisons far away. You give an imaginary flick of the hand above the rows, as if swatting away bad vibes. It's warm work, and soon a few beads of sweat pearl on your forehead, under your wool cap. You take a moment to stand and stretch. Looking out over the fields, there's actually something a bit peaceful here. It's quiet, except for birds. Far to the horizon, Faint traces of forest can be seen, misty and green. You wonder if it might even be safe to hide in such places, if the worst comes, as if the castle of trees could shield you. For now, though, all you really focus on is each step: plant, cover, plant, cover. Your neighbor Wulfric passes by in a small cart, heading out to another plot with a plow. He waves from the distance and calls over, "Morning. Field's looking fine today." You wave back. He glances at your mostly empty kitchen pot. "Aren't you off to market in town?" he asks. You pause. Usually you'd join the few villagers who sell eggs and wool at market. But with talk of plague, you wisely skipped it. You shake your head. "Not today, Wulfric. No, I'll stay. These crops won't sow themselves." He nods in understanding. "Good call. Town's full of strangers, not the best company these days." He manages a small grin that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Take care, friend." You smile gently. "Safe journey to you, and mind those sheep in your cart." He gives a grateful grin and lumbers off. You think about it. City merchants or traders might think of coronaviruses or fever pills, but in your time, staying away from crowds is the only advice. It's basically the first ever work-from-home plan. Skip the market and hope home keeps you healthy. If only there were an app that could notify the plague trend, you think, as modern folk would say. But here you rely on simple sense and gossip. By the time the afternoon sun climbs, you finish planting. The last row is done, and you brush damp hands off on your tunic. Then you retrace your steps home. In the distance you glimpse smoke from Lord Bertram's manor. He and his family have separate kitchens, but you can still smell that day's bread if the wind is right. It smells better than your pottage, but for now, you simply breathe it in and move on. Arriving home at dusk, you're exhausted but glad. The chores will continue tomorrow, but this evening you can relax a bit. You build up the hearth fire, which sputters back to life. Its warmth already feels good on your back. Ellen is stirring a pot of bean and turnip stew for supper. You lean over the pot to breathe in the aroma. It's weak stew, but hearty enough. You fetch bowls and bread. The two children sit around the table, cheeks flushed. They're excited to see you return and receive their evening hug. The four of you sit down together for what passes as dinner. Somehow, the quiet companionship brings comfort. The children bite into bread and cheese, crunching noisily. You notice crumbs fall to the floor, and smiles drift across your face. Even in this time, some joys are just being together and eating warm food. For a moment, life feels almost normal again. Then, far off, the church bells toll. One slow, echoing ring. You all pause, mid-chew. That sound is never good. In that moment, the hush around the table goes even deeper. The village has heard it too. One bell means a death in the village, someone who slept in a grave at dawn. Another ring will follow soon if it's plague. Your children look frightened. You stand up gently, ruffling their hair. "Stay here," you say, voice soft. They huddle together by the fire. You and Ellen creep outside to see. Across the fields, by the churchyard, two men shovel in silence. You recognize the silhouette of Roswin, the old midwife, always tending to dead or ill. The other gravedigger is Mord, who smells like the earth, and maybe last night's wine. They keep their backs to you. There's no cross of herbs for this one, and as you approach slowly, you see it's old Edgar, who lies there, his blanket and worst cloak covering him. Face still damp from death chill, black rings around his eyes dot. Your heart feels heavy, but you give no gasp. Everyone in the village was ready for this toll. You hear Roswin whisper one last prayer for Edgar's soul. You both stand still. The air is grim. Roswin stands, nods to Mord, who finishes quickly. They shake the dirt off their hands. Roswin gives you a sorrowful glance. No words needed. It's been that kind of day. You step back as they cover the grave. Eventually they will stack stones over it. You stay still a moment, thinking of all the neighbors taken. the silence that follows each bell. The first bell, hardly registered as tragedy. By now, multiple days in, it's like standing in line at the bakery. Slowly, you step away and head back inside. Your stomach twists at the smell of human flesh and dirt, but that's behind you now. You whisper to the air, "May he rest, and may the rest of us not have to." Inside, dinner is cold. You apologize to the family, say that duty called. You all share a quiet look, knowing Edgar won't be on the fire tomorrow. For a moment, worry silences any appetite, but hunger always wins. The stew is there, and slowly it gets eaten. Afterwards, you show the children their burial spot, quietly. They drop daisies and grass at the foot of the mound. The older one says a few words you taught her to say. The younger child is too little to remember Edgar clearly. You lift her in your arms and point to a star in the sky. "He's up there now," you murmur gently. It's true enough. Anywhere that star is shining, Edgar's soul might be looking out from. The night sky feels vast and calm above all the disorder. That night, sleep comes fitfully again. You curl under your blanket, the embers of the day's fire still holding a gentle glow. Images flicker through your thoughts. Edgar's face, the empty chairs, scenes of fields swarming with rats and fleas. They jump into your dreams like black little ninjas. If you had a candle on your nightstand, you think you'd rather it burn all night than face these night horrors. But you don't even want to move. So you lay still and close your eyes tight. Dawn breaks eventually. You wake to a weak sunlight filtering through the roughly patched roof. The smoke hole above your bed lets in fresh morning air. At least the stench of last night's grief has cleared. Ellen is already stirring again, but even she is subdued. Rising from your straw bed, you feel every muscle protest. A small ache in your shoulder. Did you hold a shovel wrong? You shake it out. Outside, a quiet bustle is beginning. Women are drawing water, children gathering eggs, and somewhere someone's wife whispers prayers, just out of earshot. You dress quietly, noting the empty places. Certain huts have blankets drying that never belonged here. The village begins to wake again, for better or worse. You step out into the fresh morning. The air is still cool, with a whisper of frost on the ground, which is good. For some reason, the cold still makes you feel safer than heat. You think of hearing once that the plague isn't winter disease, it thrives in warmth. If that's so, you're kind of glad it's colder. If only the plague knew you'd rather shiver than burn in fever. The world looks different, of course. The shock has worn off just a little. The crisp light now strikes the fields and rooftops with a new definition. There's life here yet. Few villagers nod solemnly as you pass. A couple of bravely cheerful neighbors already tend chickens or sweep stray leaves. You see two children from the village playing near a fence, chasing a cheap toy. It stabs you a bit that life still goes on in the smallest ways. Elin joins you at the well, and together you start fetching water again. This morning the wells. Water tastes a bit sweeter, or maybe it's just relief tasting sweet. You try to stand a bit taller as you carry the buckets. It's as if today you've been given a second chance. Yesterday you were just digging in fields. Today, after what you've seen, every task feels like a small victory. When you pour the water into the pot at home, you can't help but inspect it. You nod in satisfaction, still clear, and then it hits you. You haven't been touched by the plague yet. Not physically, anyway. A tiny thought buds. If a person can survive once, maybe they can again. Though it's not like it's Pokemon, you don't get another life or half health. But it feels nice to think of it like that for a moment of levity. Maybe we survived, you say to Ellen quietly. She gives your hand a squeeze and smiles the smallest, most exhausted smile you've seen. Perhaps, he whispers back. Perhaps we have. You both take a deep breath. Inhale, exhale. Tomorrow is another day, a day where you can decide what to do with this fresh start. You know there's no magic cure all around, Remedies failed, and neighbors fell. If any advice mattered at all, it boiled down to avoid crowds, fresh air, healthy eating, which, thank the gods, we did better at than most, and maybe a sprinkle of fire and holy water. In any case, you did what you could with what you had. Your stomach growls loudly to remind you of the practicalities. Ellen laughs quietly, glad to see some color in your face. You pull out the bread and cheese, a simple meal, but you savor each bite like you've never eaten bread before. Maybe it's because right now you can. And that is its own miracle. As you finish breakfast, a mild sense of humor bubbles up. If life is going to continue, you decide, it might as well have a little bit of flavor. Well, you say, quietly, to yourself, we did survive. Funny how the same meal that was just okay yesterday now tastes like a banquet fit for a king. Even Ellen smirks at that one. Outside, the chickens cluck and scratch. You step out with your shovel. There's still so much to do. The plague may have thinned the crowd, but with fewer hands. Everything that once needed to people now only has you and Mulin. The village won't cultivate half-grown fields or mend broken fences on its own. If the Lord still lives, he might not even appear. He probably thought it wise to keep his own serfs alive rather than send them into the fray. So it falls to the survivors to plant, to harvest, to keep life from unraveling. You look around at your family, two bright, alive children. Even if one dozes a bit more today than yesterday, and the only two people left you trust with everything. This massless, shadowy anxiety is easing. The sun shines without a black stain. The air is free of foul breath. And for a moment, you're just a farmer again doing farmer things. Sow seeds, milk, goat, chop wood, cook stew. The dead don't do that, so the living do. You keep your nose in the wind. Not metaphorically, actually sniffing for any sign of plague. There is none. Instead, you smell the turning earth, the smoke of a neighbor's chimney, the tempts of sheep from the field. It's almost welcome. Birds flutter overhead in triumphant song, and you're almost convinced one chirp is saying, "It's just us now, we'll have to rebuild." At the altar above the hearth, your cross dipped in holy water glints. You idly cross yourself. Today, life seems to hang by so few threads, but it hangs on. That night, as you lay down again, there is comfort in a few simple things. The home you built is still standing. The people you love are still breathing beside you, and the world outside has quieted a bit. Yes, you are exhausted, and you have scars that unseen eyes will bear the fear etched into your heart. But for the first time in days, you feel a heavy sadness mingle with something quietly triumphant. With the door closed and a new blanket for each person's bed, you pull Ellen close. The baby asleep on her chest begins to snore softly, and your children's rhythmic breathing makes you feel at home again. The wind has gotten colder tonight, but you share one blanket between you to keep warm. You realize that even surviving the bitter cold outside would be easier than reliving one night of that fever and coughing, so you press your cheek to Ellen's, breathing in her sleepy scent. You think of fresh spring, turning soil, green sprouts pushing through earth, all that awaits, if you get to see it. You wake slowly, to the gentle patter of morning rain on the thatched roof, the musky scent of damp earth and burning firewood wrapping around you like a woolen cloak. In this low-ceilinged cottage on the edge, off village green, the air is cool and dark from the overnight chill, but a small iron cauldron of porridge bubbles by the hearth. You stretch on the straw mattress, muscles coiling, and feel the rough homespun tunic against your skin, the woolen cloak folded neatly at the foot of the bed. The weak dawn light bleeds in through a narrow opening in the wall, painting the earthen floor with a sliver of gold. Outside, chicken speck at last night's scraps by the door. Your footsteps make only a soft thump against the hard-packed mud floor as you stand and approach the hearth. Your fingers brushing the long shadow of hanging hem smoked yesterday. In the morning hush, you can hear the distant caw of crows. The slow drip of water from eaves into a pile of straw, and the gentle sizzle of the porridge as it is turned with a wooden ladle. You quietly let your wife, Mary, sleep a bit longer before waking her. In the warm, low light, her face is peaceful, framed by wisps of chestnut hair on the pillow. As you scoop the thick oat porridge into an earthen bowl, the first tendrils of steam curl in the dawn air, carrying the yeasty sweetness of leavened bread and the faint smoke of the dying embers. You whisper her name, and she stirs, smiling sleepily. Together, you sit at the rough-hewn table, your night baby beside you, still half asleep in a cradle of woven willow, and share the simple morning meal, coarse rye bread soaked in thin whey, a bit of cheese, and lightly sugared porridge. Outside, the rain turns to a soft mist. In the village beyond your door, the world is waking at its own steady pace. You remember your first meal off today always means work is soon to follow. Soon you will rise with the sun, to plow or sow, or reap your share of the fields, and care for the goats and hens. But right now, the day feels peaceful. The forest air is cleaned, and you breathe deeply. The oats rustle from the granary as your neighbor's little boy shuffles past to deliver a measure to the mills. Somewhere down the lane a dog barks. The smell of wood smoke and spruce needles lingers on a breeze through the open door. Just beyond the fences, tall oaks shimmer silver and thinnest, and you can hear the river bubbling behind the forest, as if time itself has slowed for you. The world feels safe. You offer a gentle prayer of thanks for this morning, to whichever saint might be listening, Saint Swithin, perhaps, or Bridget, for mercy on the harvest. This is how your days usually begin, with gratitude and routine. You will look forward to the quiet satisfaction of hard work in the soil, the buckle of leather boots and jingle of iron tools, the rough braid of your straw-filled bed beneath you, the chatter of market women bartering for salt and wool. After clearing the bowls, you step outside. The cottage is one among many in the village, a cluster of watland daub homes huddled around a central green. You hear a low conversation as two men begin harnessing oxen for the day's plowing. Chickens peck up slugs and grubs, and a fat cat slinks past chasing arret. Everywhere, wood smoke rises from chimneys, mixing with the mist and the sweet tang of harvested grain. As your neighbors start fires and light lanterns, you pull on your worn leather boots, smooth your cap and cloak, and head out barefoot toward the fields. Your feet sink slightly into the damp mud of early summer morning as dew-kissed blades of grass brush your ankles. The earthy scent of wet soil, crushed leaves, and bilberry bushes fills your lungs. A faint smile comes to your lips as you listen to the birdsong in the hedgerows, blackbirds and larks performing their morning chorus just for you. The caress of the cool mist is comforting. It's a fresh start to a new day. If you could stand on the earth forever like this, praising God for peace, feeding your family, working the fields like your father and his father before him, this might last forever. But memories are waking in Thier too, like the smell of distant burning, memories of darker days. You recall when you were a boy, just this time of morning, running bare-legged through sun-flooded fields while your mother's heart was as light as her pail of milk. She told you of the great famine back then, minus 1315 to 1317. They called it, when rain never stopped, and harvest after harvest failed. It was like all of nature cried out. She'd whispered by the hearth, feeding you scraps of barley porridge. Cows grew thin as sticks, and neighbors went hungry. You were too young to understand cannibalism or infanticide then, but you remember grown men's hollow eyes, thistlelands of empty granaries, and how your grandmother hid salt and nuts in the beams. One winter, your grandmother said, it was so cold and so lean that some whispered that even children's bones were wash-head-cline of marrow by starvation. Those were stories of hardship you thought were far behind you, long-forgotten frost in springtime. But no, there is a different dread on the wind. There have been whispered rumors among traveling merchants about sickness on the roads, about entire villages where everyone has fallen ill in a day, bodies piled like fagots. But it sounds far away, in exotic names you only know from far-off chronicles. Still, when a strange peddler with a wooden leg hobbled through here last week, muttering of pestilence, you forced down a law. In your village, the only plague you'd known was the barley smut in wet years, wasn't it? Yet the Wahi clutched his cloak, eyes darting as if unseen eyes bore into him. It left a chill under your ribs. You shake the feeling off. Today is an ordinary day, and to think more of fates is to invite worry. Beside your small barn, you see neighbors' sheep moving off to pasture. One of the oldest ewes is limping, just at twisted hoof. Probably. Already her shepherd gently turns her to grass. That feels banal and good. Trivial things to fix. You remember an old saying your grandmother had about pests. It was fleas on the rats, and rats on the ship, she used to say, indicating how sickness traveled on trade routes. Some scholars later wrote that the dead rats on ships from far-off Genoa spread the plague by fleas. But right now, there are no rats here at the water's edge, just your small fire and your stirrings. Walking toward the oat field, where you will work, you pause by the communal well, cupping cold water for your face. Tomorrow will be Sunday. Today is plowing. You tug on the plow's wooden handle, smelling the fresh pine polish your father gave it. As the oxen strain against their yokes, you feel the warm wood and old rope. Hearing them grunt in the morning quiet, you begin to guide them through the field, earth turning under your blade. Step by steady step, you follow the sun's path. The day warms. The sour smell of freshly turned sod mixes with wildflowers at the field's edge. Thistle, clover, a faint note of lavender from your wife's sachets hung in the barn. Thump, thump. You track the rhythm of hoofbeats. Around midday, the others break their labors. You all gather by the barn under a wide oak tree for a simple meal. Today it's barley bread smeared with goat cheese and soft-boiled eggs. An unexpected treat from Robert's luck in the henhouse, washed down with sour ale. A gentle breeze carries tales from down the road. The soldiers who marched through last month had spoken of the war with the King of France going pearly. Our young men had been called to muster in London. Now they board ships for France, the men whispered. Each hushed laugh around the fire, each passing grumble about soldiers in their parlor, feels distant. Some think the war is as far away as the Antipodes. Others feel the weight of taxes and tithe. You're told that war has always meant worse times for peasants. Peasants are taxed whenever a new campaign begins. Your own contribution today is another basket of grain and 2 new chickens to the reeve. Saw that more Englishmen might get fat at our expense. Even Robert's goose was taken last month. Still, Forno, you chew in silence, glancing up at the shifting clouds, thinking of your small ones at home. As you work, you try to keep your mind light. You joke with the others quietly. The stable cat, Mittens, padding in circles around your feet today, is better fed than any night, and has 9 lives more to spurth in them. You quip, grinning. Old Marjorie suggests that your worn boots could use a laugh if they had stories to tell. They'd say, hey, put some soles on me at least. The pun draws smirks. Lightness seems to keep the deeper fears at bay, if only for a moment. Yet, when you think of the war in France, of the famine, and now these rumors, you feel a tiny prickle along your spine. The air is calm, but your pulse is quickening it. What might be coming? Late afternoon, you return home to Mary and the children. Your damp shirt and pants soon dry by the fire, and you take up the afternoon task of weaving plaiting straw into baskets, while your eldest, young Edith, tells you in her small voice about the sparrows at the stream, and your son, little Tomas, pats stray cat fur and giggles. The golden light of afternoon filters through the mill windows across the room, dappling the wall with dancing shadows of motes. Mary cracks eggs for supper as you weave, the smell of beaten eggs and onions sautéing in lard rising. Outside, the wind has died down. The world seems settled again. There is something soothing in the daily routines, as if safety lies in the mundane. The hearth fire crackles. You can feel its warmth on your cheeks as darkness slowly falls. On the wooden table, you lay out fresh barley gruel, spiced with honey and herby nettles gathered earlier. Beside your bowl, on the plank bench, you'll find the kindly village priest, Father Bernard, sitting with a gentle smile. He had come by after dusk to visit and bless the meal, his eyes twinkling below his thick salt and pepper eyebrows. As you eat, he begins toss peak of Saint Fiacre, the patron of healing and good harvests. In his deep voice, he chants a prayer for Thessic and a protection against plague. God's justice runs in ways we may not understand, he murmurs between bites, staring into his bowl. He watches us. Pray for mercy, and we will learn to endure, as our fathers did. This is what life is. Community, family, faith. You bite into the coarse bread and the savory onion. You listen to the creak of Father Bernard shifting on the bench, and the clink of wooden spoons. The children tumble around your legs, sleepy after one more bedtime story and kisses. The nearby village church bell tolls through softly in the distance, an anchor in the night. Father Bernard pats your shoulder, giving thanks with Thesson of the cross. No one is sick here. For a moment, you dare hope that perhaps these far-off terrors will pass you by. But then outside, on the cool night breeze, you think you catch something unusual. At first it is subtle, a faint scent, bittersweet and cloying, like a rich perfume that is wrong for the season. Closer now, it smells gnarly of death. Were you imagining things? You jump when suddenly a timid scratching at the door. Makisu's start. Outside stands a damp traveler you do not recognize. A wiry man in shabby but once fine cloak. Eyes sunken, hands curled over the hood of his cloak. Something about him is off. Perhaps the glaze in his eyes. Good evening, he says softly, voice low. He has a faded scar on his cheek, and wears no hood in the cool night air. You notice flecks of mud on his cloak. He tells a strange tale. He had been traveling for weeks, visiting monasteries far south, delivering a sick monk to Florence. On his return journey, he says, the monk had died of fever and pain in his chest, and he had helped bury him on a hillside in Italy. Now he is headed north to see his family in the city. But some days since, he stammers, I feel a swell here. He points to swollen glands beneath his arm, and fever wavers in my bones. My wife lies ill at home, near this very field. He glances toward a thatched cottage across the glen. You feel a chill. Why come here if she's sick, instead of heading home? Suspicion rises. Father Bernard frowns. Mary edges away. You recall hearing similar stories last year in the market. Foreigners, a fever, uncanny black spots, and death. The peddler that once passed through gave a frightened look like this man's when he spoke of pestilence. Is this the Black Death? The whisper of the man's breathing is labored. Sweat beads on his brow. You quietly voice the rules. The stranger must sleep outside until morning. Inside, flames lick high, not for comfort, but to clarify a boundary. You close and bolt the door, heavy lodestar in hand. They might flee, run to plague-riddled cities, but we cannot invite head here. That night, sleep eludes you. You lie in the quiet darkened room, hearing the stranger whine softly through thrall. Through the tiny window, the moon glows cold on the barley field where the oxen have settled forth night. You clutch at the edge of the cot, the straw pricking the backs of your fingers, the candle guttering. The wind is still. Silence is thick as wool around you. In dreams, you see the eyes of the stranger's wife, glassy and dilated, the black spots blooming on her skin. When the muezzin calls to prayer in your half doze, you wake with a start, questioning if it was all shadow-play. At first light, Mary and you step outside. The traveler is gone, cloak, boots, all trace of his story, vanishatus. If it were a bad dream, on the gatepost, as if scrawled by a child, are the words, "Fear not, the devil, officetulence. It rides on wings of man," perhaps meant to shock, perhaps some fool's jest. But you recall Thefetid banner at the fair last year. Death flies on the dust of distant sails. It's the same. In any case, the Omenin stories send a tremor through your heart. What? Have you invited? Yet today must be faced. You rub your bleary eyes and prepare to go out. You hear a strange quiet outside. No chattering neighbors, no clattering cart, just the scurry of a rat in the night and the faint hoot of an owl. Maybe everyone is still abed. The fog that had seemed to clear lies thick around the fields, visible in palatendrils. The morning is far cooler than last night. You shudder, clutching your cloak more tightly. Something intangible presses on you. Even the earth feels colder. You should begin as usual. But in the hush, something is off. Further down the track, your neighbor Robert stands by his barn doorway, shoulders slumped. As you approach, he lifts a pale face at you, dark circles under, his eyes sweat-dampened, hair plastered to his brow. "He's dying," Robert croaks, pointing a trembling finger to his neck. You follow it with your gaze. There, inches from his child's cradled head, is a dark swollen lump on his sibling's throat, like a blueberry pressed to the skin. The child is limp, eyes glassy. A hush fell over the cottage. He whispers, "Marie's so cold, so hot. I don't know what to do." All at once, the world tilts. Without thinking, you grip Robert's hand and pull him inside the barn, away from others. You shed a cloak from a wall peg and wrap it around the child's shivering shoulders. Water is brought, herbs from the windowsill, prayers muttered. Robert tears at his hair, weeps. The baby coughs feebly, eyes flickering in delirium. You want to scream. No priest, no doctor, no help. And now it's here, in your world. From the window, you look out. Paths, which just hours ago were busy with men scything and women churning butter, are silent. In town, the church bells toll erratically, perhaps for the morning mass, but it sounds like a funeral knell, and then you hear it. Faint, at first, a rhythmic staccato note, rising and falling, the desperate banging of the bedridden. It comes from down the way, over yonder at Mary's old aunt's house. Aunt Agnes is coughing too, wailing for mercy, or throwing the stool at the wall. You swallow a scream in your throat. This is no jest of fate. This is happening. Hours pass like centuries. Before midday, you help Robert dig a shallow pit in the barnyard and lower Marianne. No cloth, no prayers, just earth over tiny body. His sobs echo, but you keep voiceless solace, kneeling, steadying him with your presence. He unmans himself in grief, wailing for God's mercy. You tell him, softly, God sees. She is at peace. Father Bernard, summoned at twilight, lays a gentle hand on Robert's shoulder. Ash crumbles to rock Marie's sibling in his arms. Around you, others gather, fright flickering in their eyes, whispering of neighbors, of rats in granaries, of war turning far-off fields to graves. That night, as you stoke the fire, Mary's hand trembling in yours, you recall how it is said that 1 in 3 in Europe would soon lie dead. This man's sickness is a cold proof of rumors. Even as you speak softly to comfort Robert, you try to steady your own breath. There is something suffocating in the darkness tonight, yet to the crying of Robert's prayers and the sobbing of the village folk, you fold your cloak higher around your chest and murmur, "She is in God's hands now. Tomorrow you will bring more sage and thyme, will light incense around the door, as some say, and try water blessings from the priest." You think of old remedies you learned, a posy of herbs in one's pocket to ward off the corrupt air, as Mary used to put cloves and rosemary under her shawl. For now, you sit by the hearth, reassuring the children, lulling the youngest, letting them lull you back to sleep. The gentle crackle of the embers feels soothing even now, and as you rock Thomas with a lullaby, his eyelids drooping, you only sing to the tune of Ring-a-Ring, O Roses. You remember that children's rhyme, From Home, and how it's said to be about plague, though you'd always thought it a tale. Now you see the wisdom, posies toward the stink. In the quiet of night, you dare to whisper something anachronistic, as if the fire itself might acknowledge. If you were here in another age, you might click like or subscribe to this calming story. A gentle smile flickers in your lips at the thought. Indeed, if this tale were to drift to some distant future, perhaps gentle souls would hum like to encourage the teller. Oh, but it is real, you murmur to the slumbering Mary, and we must endure. 3 days later, the heat has not broken. More are sick. The churchyard near the oak tree holds grave after shallow grave, marked by simple crosses of twigs. In your simple home, you sleep in shifts by the bedside of Aunt Agnes. Her skin is marble white, black spots on her arms, her breath coming in shallow whistles. You'll bathe her head with cool water and rosemary. You hold her hand tightly as she moans of dreams. Agnes trembles. It's the end of the world, child, she hisses weakly. You will, your heart not to break under through it, and steady yourself by humming an old lullaby. The children are sleeping through it. Bliss, you must be strong. Even in these dark days, life still pulses through quiet moments. At dusk, one evening, as your arm matches from cradling Agnes, you step to the window. The silver blade of the moon cuts through an unseen hush. Outside, a cat curls at the windowsill. You open the pane a crack. The cool night breeze brings the temps, off herbs you burned, sage, and rosemary, to ward off the plague wind. From somewhere in the village, faintly, you hear a child laugh. Thank heavens, perhaps the whole village hasn't fallen in those fleeting quiet seconds. You allow yourself a thought. God, I give up control. For now, you have done what you can. Fresh linen, prayers, potions of vinegar and garlic, burned herbs, in the hearth. Tomorrow Yah will, again. You will light more candles at the shrine, give alms to the poor, whatever it takes. The night air is cool. You breathe it in, trying to cool your brow. The scent of sage reminds you of peace. You sit there a long while, hands on wooden sill, silent except for your heartbeat and the occasional hoot of owl. In the dawn glow, you feel strength returning. There is work to do. You clamber over the fence into Agnes' garden behind the cottage. In one half of the plot, seedlings are just sprouting. In the other, herbs stand tall. Lemon balm, mint, feverfew, yarrow, tended by your ant-like treasured children. Quickly you gather handfuls of feverfew and mint, then half a rooster's worth of coals from the chimney. Soon, inside the small cottage that had been alive with coughs, the steam of herbs softens the corners of the morning. You make Agnes drink the bitter brew, and then lie her down by the fire again. Father Bernard is there now, making sign of the cross on her forehead. She survives the day, shivering a few times by the fire, and that evening she opens her eyes. The sight of you at the bedside, fingers stroking her brow, makes her thin lips form a crooked smile. You feel a tear relief glistening as she weakly touches your face. It is a small miracle in this broken world. Mary tends tough soup at table. You ladle it with fresh broth and bread, and find a few crackers for the children, who haven't yet seen the worst. Even as you find these mercies, the village changes. Some have already gathered their things and fled on carts, fearing this curse. Others barricade themselves in. The manor lord's soldiers came through, rounding up all the empty grain and chicken for the king's coffers, leaving little for the living. Still, tonight, by the measure of those gathered at your door, more than before remain. You and your neighbors keep watch for danger in each other's stead. There is no official help. There is only each other. As nights pass, you and the others fall into routines of vigilance and quiet hope. Mary has taken to waking you with a hymn at dawn. You kneel outside with arms outstretched, thanking any saint or deity that might as the sun finally dispels night's shadow. Then you shake out the blankets and herd the goats to pasture. Anything alive outside must be kept alive to eat tomorrow. You keep the barn floors swept of straw and soaked in herbs. You and Father Bernard decide to put out clean cloths of vinegar. It's rumored even soins might be cleaned in it to kill contagion. You sprinkle ashes from last night's fire in every corner. Bimiday children gather at a safe distance to watch the men pour boiling water into the ditch, hoping it might kill fleas. In the evenings, after the agonies, the bore of incense and hymns over soot-scented water, you summon to messfind yourself, seated on a fence, or by a dying fire with others who survived. The dark humor creeps in. We've done our share of boils. One woman giggles nervously. I'd make a fine chef of disease. You manage a dry smile. The joke is both silly and comforting. Another adds, I knew I should have roasted that snake I killed last week and rubbed it on my head, like the crazies do. The men laugh, despite themselves. All day you've been vegged in gloom, and yet these small jests, like burning the crops after reaping, help the dreadnought grow as tall. Indeed, there is a wicked sort of excess to it all. The alarms and prayers, the running to the cesspit, the burying, the foolish cures. You squirt the little goose droppings on the boil next and quip, well, the gods help those who help themselves. It draws a snort. Time and again, you think, by tomorrow, it will all be over. In a way it is. Every day you swallow a new terror, and it passes. When at last the fever breaks in your aunt, and she is up and eating bread with you again, life flows in, fragile, and all the more sweet. For a moment, you nearly laugh to see her, up and about, spinning like a girl in the courtyard, almost forgetting what happened. And that night, your little Tomas succumbs to sleep beside you, without fear. Perhaps that is the greatest gift. Weeks slide by in this way, each night a tiny eternity, each morning a small victory. Some mornings you walk into the field and realize suddenly that it smells different. The sweet promise of hay and drying grass. Life's green taste on your tongue. The war is still happening but now feels distant. One can hardly think of Texas while leaning over a death-stricken bed. The famine is still back there in memory, but belly isn't emptier than it was last year. In some strange way, the plague has made simple things, fresh butter on your bread, eggs from young hens, a hug from Mary, mean more. It's like awakening from a long nightmare to a world that's irreversibly different, yet continues. By late summer, the worst has passed. Of the 30 men and women you once counted in this village, half remain. You stand by the well and watch as children, fewer children, and quieter now, play by obscene pebbles. The town crier has proclaimed that the plague has receded in most places. The old church bell rings, with a joyful new rhythm. People begin sweeping dust and ash out of their homes, weaving wreaths of sage and woad. Food is still scarce, but there is food again. War news is scarce, but at least the nightly talk of death has quieted you, for one, have changed. Under the thatch, you hold Mary and whisper, thanks to whatever watched over you. You remember so clearly the earlier nights, how you had to convince yourself that the rooftops hadn't caved in. Now, you find peace, easily, as if you earned it. Each sunrise comes as a quiet reward. Tonight, as you cradle your youngest by the fire, you try out the old children's rhyme, quietly for yourself again, ring around the rosy. You feel the truth of it now. You show the fingers like posies in your pocket. Ashes, ashes. Without realizing, you've sung it softly to the baby. You wonder how many more sack lullabies children will need. The old survivors count you by the hearth in soft comfort. You know not to take anything for granted anymore. There are no guarantees beyond morning and night, but for now, you have them. Future, whether plagues return or another war, will come on its own time, and you'll meet it as one who has lived 1,000 lifetimes in these few weeks. For tonight, though, it is quiet. You sip the cool chamomile tea, the steam warm on your lips. The low crackle of embers is almost hypnotic. You relish the comfortable ache in your bones from hard work. The feeling of that straw supporting you as you lie down, the weight of a peaceful arm around your waist. If you could, you would press a gentle like for this moment. This simple piece reclaimed, and perhaps even subscribe. 2 more such nights of dawns and hearth. But here, in the hush, there are no buttons, tucklick, only the soft sigh of breath and the promise of another morning. You close your eyes, smiling at the thought, and let the world dissolve into sleep.